I went for a walk, socially distanced with some friends yesterday who said, man, are you just hanging out? I mean, what are you doing? I'm like, are you kidding me?
You're busier.
The last
busier
couple months,
now.
Yeah, they're like, how can you do what you're doing from home? I'm like, oh my God, that's 7 days a week, man. Like it's Groundhog Day. Every day you wake up and go back to the computer and start making calls and doing emails and, trying to help a few more businesses to make it through.
Staebler, it's a great pleasure having you online with us today and seeing your shiny, happy, smiling face on video.
And all my hair, my 70s hair that's growing, yeah.
I saw you had a beard a couple of weeks ago. What happened?
Oh, well, what happened is my wife happened. She laid down the law and said, one of us, you need to choose your beard or your wife in quarantine. And that was an
Good
easy
choice.
one for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Good choice. Yeah. Great family, great wife. We've been, it's funny with all these videos and conferences that everyone's doing, you get a real take on how people are living in living rooms and kitchens and offices at the house. So you
my
get a real
9-year-old
taste.
just brought me a cup of coffee for my last meeting. I am the best dad ever. Apparently, I have beautiful children.
Oh, you do. You do. We've been seeing them on Facebook. So
Yeah.
kudos to the family.
Mm-hmm.
Well, tell us a little bit about you. Obviously, for those of us that know you as a VP for Economic Development at Wayne State University, and also president of TechTown. Those are titles and incredible roles that you play. But give us a little bit of a background. For example, where you grew up, what's your connection to Detroit,
Yeah.
Ideas that you had as you started moving into the economic field of what you've been doing with business. I think it's really interesting to hear a little bit about your background in particular.
Sure. So, I grew up on the northwest side of Detroit, and went to Detroit public schools in the 70s and 80s. So now I've told you how old I am ish. I did go to high school at U of D High over on 7 Mile. So I didn't go to DPS all the way through 12th grade, but growing up it was a time of tremendous change in the city. And it was a really interesting place to live and grow up. Always knew that the city was changing and to some extent struggling. For those of us old enough to remember that time, the auto industry, which obviously fuels to a large degree Detroit, was going through a first wave of automation and international competition coming in. That was the last one out, leave the lights on era back in the day. So even then, I saw the changes happening in my neighborhood, in my city, and I said, man, I want to be a part of helping this to come back. But I left, like a lot of folks do. I left for college. I went off to Harvard as an undergrad and always planned to come back and do public service, but woke up one morning in 1992, and there was a presidential debate. It was Bush 1 versus Bill Clinton. And I remember thinking, here are two dudes totally out of touch with the real world. Bush famously didn't know how much a gallon of milk cost. They asked him that in a debate. Think how different our debates are now, the types of things they ask. And then he didn't know what the scanners were in a supermarket. And God bless him, he didn't have to go to a supermarket. So, that's great. And then Bill Clinton never had a real job. He was a law professor for one semester before running for attorney general. And I just remember thinking that, if I was ever going to have an impact on public policy, I ought to go out and see how the real world works a little bit, see the impact that public policy has on people. And I wanted to be a little more connected in that way. So I went out and got a job and worked for, back then, what we would have called a fintech. I'm sorry, now what we would call a fintech. Yeah. Back then, we just called it like a trading firm or something. I don't remember. But we did algorithm-based trading and proprietary risk modeling systems, and ended up getting bought by a big bank after I was there for about 5 or 6 years, called Bear Stearns, which died 11 years ago. But I was in Chicago for 5 years and then in London for 5 years. And I woke up one morning and said, oh man, I was supposed to do this for like 2 years before I went back to public service. Figure out how the real world works, because you can do that when you're 20. You think, you can learn how the world works in 2 years. And instead it's been a decade, and here I am living 3,000 miles from home.
Knowing less than you probably thought that you would have ever at the age
Oh
of
yeah.
23.
Knowing how, you know, 20, you already think you kind of know everything.
I know.
By 30, I knew nothing.
Nothing. I know.
So I woke up, and with some encouragement from my fantastic wife, I quit. I quit the bank. I went back to grad school at the London School of Economics, and I studied comparative politics and political economy, sort of how does economics and how does policy affect, how's governmental policy affect real people around trade, around employment, around healthcare, around, you know, all of the types of issues that we care about as individuals that affect our daily lives. And I wrote my dissertation on this new thing, how states were responding to globalization, called economic development. It wasn't really a term that people, you know, 20 years ago were really using to the degree they were today. And I used Michigan as a model because that's what I was really focused on. So I wrote a dissertation about what works, what doesn't, and what the implications were for Michigan and what we should be doing. And finished that up in like 2005, moved back to Michigan, and got a job at the state's economic development agency, where I sort of put the academic and the professional work together. So I started off running our capital access programs, how to make sure small businesses get access through bank capital, or on the tech side, angels and venture capitalists, or maybe private equity. And then within a couple of years, I was running sort of all the economic development programs for the state. Some of them through the 21st Century Jobs Fund, and then others through more traditional mega and brownfield and Renaissance zone programs as well. And then change of administration, 2011 rolls around. I got a call from a headhunter that said, Alan Gilmore, who's the president of Wayne State at the time, wants to talk to you. And I didn't even ask about what. If Alan Gilmore calls, you jump.
Yeah.
And ended up, I met Alan. He said, I want you to do economic development for the university. And I said, what's economic development for a university? And I remember him saying, I don't know. Let's figure it out. And I said, that's the job that I want.
On the job training.
Yes. So here I am 9 years later. Amazing. And, you know, we've got an entire economic development group and TechTown as well. So a total of about 60, 70 people all in, helping businesses, doing placemaking, growing talent, and doing all sorts of stuff across the city.
I mean, you couldn't be better qualified for for what you're doing. Again, it's a learning experience all the way around, but oh my God. I mean, when you think of that, really careers, and if you look at careers that have sort of different levels or phases to them, as yours clearly has, it takes a compilation of different experiences, even different conversations, let alone different schooling that you had in different locations. I think a lot of experience comes from where you are at the time too, physically, so that you can learn and bring that back into whatever your experience is that you're moving into.
I always joke that we tend to think of the people here as not all that talented or not all that smart, but the people there, wherever there is, the coast, or, you know, the big city or whatever, they're geniuses. I always joke that if I moved 150 miles away, I'd gain 10 IQ points in the minds of the people here. But
yeah, no, I mean, a little, you know, I too, I worked at the Justice Department in DC with Clinton when he was in office, dating myself as well. So, and did quite a bit of work in strategy for cities like LA and Atlantic City, and worked in Europe with an undergrad in international relations up at State. So I see, you know, the impact that you can make, I'm talking to you in particular, can make within a city like Detroit, and the understanding of where business and finance and economics around that really can meld into impact, into placemaking is I think, you know, the way of the future in so many ways, because you're also looking at understanding the core dynamics of economies of scale, but also the people that make up those economies of scale, i.e. small businesses in the case of TechTown.
Well, and residents, and you know, it's really important. I think a lot of people plop down, they parachute into a city, especially those really smart people from the coasts or some other place. They pop down and say, aha, we have the answer. But they never stop to talk to the people here about what the question was. You know, they assume they have the answer, but they're answering some other question, because so many of the efforts over the last 50 years that we've attempted to address sort of perceived problems in Detroit aren't the problems of the residents. They're the problems of the suburbanites, or the problems of the bankers or whatnot. And, it's really important to actually go into a neighborhood and ask the people there, not what do you think of my plan for your neighborhood, but what are
Mm-hmm.
your plans for your neighborhood?
Mm-hmm.
How can I help you to generate intergenerational, break cycles of intergenerational poverty, or
Mm-hmm.
generate wealth, or create amenities in your neighborhood that you can walk to, or jobs in your neighborhood?
Mm-hmm.
Those types of things that, to some extent, uh, unless you come from a background where you're a resident and a community member, you don't think about it from that perspective.
Doesn't TechTown have an organization? I think I remember that there is a neighborhoods organization that TechTown does run that does do some kind of work like that.
We don't run our own neighborhood organization. We
Mm-hmm.
partner with a ton
Mm-hmm.
of them. So all of our neighborhood based small business work is done in
Mm-hmm.
partnership with local community development corps. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
an Eastside Community Network, or a Grandmont Rosedale Development Corp, or a
Mm-hmm.
Jefferson East Incorporated. Those types of organizations that are in the neighborhoods day after day, have been there for decades, and we partner with them and rely on them
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that they're directing us to help implement the plans of the people in the neighborhood. The people in the neighborhood are saying, we need a coffee shop,
Yeah.
we need a restaurant that we can afford, not some place to sell me $8 lattes, or things like that. So we work very closely with those people to make sure that we're successful.
And then what's the role that TechTown plays in that conversation? I mean, clearly you're an aggregator, but also a strategist. And then what do you do actually? So let's say somebody says within, Island View that they're looking for a coffee shop, for example. Hopefully that happens sometime soon again.
Yeah.
What's the role that TechTown plays?
So we certainly will look at things at a real high level, and we'll be a thought partner with some of these CDCs, but we're actually much more tactical. They
Mm-hmm.
say they need a coffee shop. We run a retail boot camp to help start coffee shops.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll literally say, I've got a person who wants to start a coffee shop. Let's
Mm-hmm.
find a location. And often the CDC has a location because they're building out commercial corridor retail or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. And we'll
Mm-hmm.
say, let's partner with you. You guys put in the infrastructure. We'll do the business technical assistance. We'll help them with inventory, point of sale, marketing, getting the loan to do the construction, getting the permitting done. We might partner with the DGC or the district business liaison on that or something. So, we're really hands-on and tactical in a much more concrete way than I think most other organizations that do what we do or purport to do what we do are, which makes it very hard to scale because it's
Mm-hmm.
very high touch. It's very time and human intensive work. But it's the only way it really gets done when you're trying to overcome all of these barriers that folks have to being
Mm-hmm.
bankable, or to even knowing the opportunities that exist, or having the knowledge to set up a business.
So I tend to spend lot of my downtime, whatever time that is, probably more now than
Yeah.
not. But thinking about, these bigger topics. So for example, you've got all these globally, locally, nationally, regionally, you have all these foundations that then cipher money down to nonprofits, that then cipher money down into small businesses. And of course, within that ecosystem, you have an organization like TechTown that comes in as a service model, let's say, or
Mhm.
as a aggregated support mechanism
Yeah.
to executing. It sounds like executing the work,
Yeah.
but one of these sort of thoughts that I've been having over, especially, if you sort of start looking at these bigger pictures and at times that we find ourselves in now, is there maybe a solution that is better? And there's no one solution, of course, but a solution that might be better placed when you look at, for example, a geography. And again, I'm using
Mm.
Island View as an example, or Midtown as an example, as Detroit was starting to build out. I'm talking downtown nucleus. So is it maybe a better suited model to, for example, focus in on a geography, let's say Midtown, and in
Yeah.
that geography you start putting in economics, you start putting in retail, you start putting in whatever needs to happen, the gyms, the schools, the housing,
Right.
and the like? Or is the model that maybe might work better one of those that are more dispersed income or dispersed funding that happens, for example, let's say in the sense of education or small business, but it's dispersed among multiple geographies. So let's say Midtown and Detroit, downtown and Island View and the West Village. Is there kind of a mindset that you have been seeing globally, locally, nationally that might work better? Because it's really about producing results.
It is. You know, in the economic development community, we talk about targeted interventions versus spreading the peanut butter around, right? And this is what I'll say. And we've definitely approached our work in Detroit, and a lot of the community and ecosystem in our field here is definitely trying to be more targeted with interventions. The strategic neighborhoods that have been sort of highlighted, and now there's targeted funding through the Strategic Neighborhood Fund. There's a lot of added incentives and subsidy that's going to work on those commercial corridors, both on a residential side and on a commercial side, is important, and I think that is going to be more effective. I will say, however, I'm always hesitant to draw lines on a map and say this is where the growth is going to occur, or this is where the subsidy is going to occur, because markets tell you these things to some extent. If somebody can open up a restaurant over here, if the numbers work for it, okay, I'm not going to say let's not do that. And I want to help those people, but with limited resources, targeting geographically can make a lot of sense. It's why our work really gets targeted along sort of 7 or 8 different commercial corridors in the city, because we recognize that those corridors historically developed organically to service the residents, alongside them. And the goal is to create these walkable neighborhoods where you can walk to work, where you can walk to get coffee, where you can walk to buy groceries or get your dry cleaning done or whatever it is you need. Because that's how we used to do things, and they work. And it's all well and good to have a house that only costs $4,000. That sounds really cheap. But if you got to drive 20 minutes to go get a cup of coffee or to grab a can of soup, that's a problem.
Yeah. What do you think that sort of magic factor is in making a city a city? I mean, you live, I think, outside of Detroit. Yeah, and I do as well, due to whatever circumstances, the choices that are made. And I think there's pluses and minuses to both. What is it about a city? The New Yorks of the world, the Londons, the Paris, of the world, the Clevelands, of course, Detroits of the world. What is it that makes the city that sort of nucleus, that those components that really make it so special, that energy, that gusto, that desire, that drive? And then ultimately, actually, for Detroit in particular, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, it's like Detroit didn't even have to pay a PR agency to do any kind of PR because the world was, on the bandwagon.
It, right? I'm told Detroit is it.
Detroit is it. Yeah. But it is. Detroit is really it. That's why I came back, and that's why you came back. And that's why a lot of us came back, because Detroit really is it. And what is it? What is it that makes up a city that is so compelling to folks that they want to live in the city?
So cities, in my mind at least, and this is a personal opinion, cities are cool because they have lots of different stuff. And people are always trying new things and changing, and you can't control it. And some of it you hate, and some of it sucks, but some of it is cool, and you never thought that you would something like that, but you happen to go to it or try it because it was in proximity to you. And that's, if you want to get all like academic, cities exist to reduce transaction costs between yada, yada, yada. Ed Blazer at Harvard will tell you why the rise of cities happened, right? Yeah. But but it's true. Like, I can walk down the street and get 4 different cuisines and 3 different types of product and be like, wait, there's a store to do what? A unicorn supply shop? What is that? Like, right? Like, that's the weird stuff that happens in cities that makes it cool. And some people get frustrated. They're like, we shouldn't let this in our city. Well, like, don't go to it. Yeah. If you want to control everything that happens in your little world, go buy yourself 40 acres out in the boonies somewhere, put up a big fence and be like, this is what's going to happen here. But cities, in my mind, are beautiful, wonderful things because they're spontaneous, they're a little
Yeah.
out of control. You know, people say, oh, a Bagger Dave's is opening up downtown. I'm never going there. And I'm like, okay, don't.
Yeah.
But judging by the fact that there's a line out the door, or did Bagger Dave's close? I don't know. One of those did.
Yeah.
You know, Buffalo Wild Wings. That's it. Buffalo. We have the biggest Buffalo Wild Wings. I don't ever want to go to Buffalo Wild Wings. Buffalo Wild Wings is bad. All right, not bad like evil. Bad like the food isn't good. You know, I much rather Sweetwater's has the best wings in the world, and they're, you know, just down the block. Why would I ever go to Buffalo Wild Wings? But there's a line of people out the door at Buffalo Wild Wings.
Yeah.
Good for them.
Yeah.
It's a city. They can have their stuff.
Choices. Totally. You have your own mind. Yeah. Your own choices and I think it's also those like random, as you said, those random connections and those random bursts of energy that happen that you can make anything, you know, you're sitting in a restaurant and you could meet a total stranger, and out of that, who knows what conversation.
And my favorite thing about Detroit is that actually is the hidden gems of Detroit. Yeah. Detroit is very much a insider city. It is not an easy city. You know, there are a lot of, you go to Chicago and and especially the North Side looks very much like, you know, commercially, there's a Panera and a Starbucks and you know, whatever, a Buffalo Wild Wings on every friggin' corner.
Status quo. Yeah.
Yeah,
status
you get
quo.
it, right? It's corporate, whatever.
Yeah.
In Detroit, you'll cruise down an alleyway and turn around a corner, and next thing you know, you're on the beautiful patio of El Barzone, where they serve Italian and Mexican food, and like, oh, I didn't know that was happening. There's hidden gems. You'll drive through an abandoned neighborhood, and next thing you know, you're at the Polish Yacht Club. You're transported back in time. So there's these things that people just don't know about. And it makes you feel kind of like, yeah, I'm cool. Like I went down that secret alleyway and found something.
Yeah. And I remember also, I mean, you might remember too, and this is probably really dating us, but back in the 90s and, you know, early 90s when we used to go into another Detroit, I mean, it was a completely different Detroit than what we see. I'm talking the core downtown Detroit now, but you still see a lot of the special secret sauces of the city now. I mean, not a lot, you know, within those core businesses that have been around for a long time, not a lot's actually changed. There's still many of them, you know, are still there, putting aside the last month of our lives, which we'll talk about in a second, but many of them are still there.
I get asked all the time by people, like, I kind of joke that I'm Julie McCoy, talk about dating yourself. Like I'm the tour guide or the concierge or, you know, anyway, so, hey, yeah, exactly. Hey, Ned, I'm going to Detroit this weekend.
Yeah, tell me about it. Yeah.
What should I do? Where should I eat? Where should I, you know, whatever. And I always ask, or I'm having dinner with some friends from out of town, where should I take them? And I always say, do you want new Detroit? Do you want old Detroit, or do you want, I'm going to drop your body after you eat amazing food in Detroit? Like, because you can have all.
You got it all. Yeah.
In the city. And I think that's amazing.
It's amazing. It is a jewel. It is a gem. So back to TechTown. I remember when we first met a couple of years ago and I was just starting to launch the Detroitisit, you could not have been more gracious with your time. You sat down with me a couple of times. You could not have been more gracious with opening up your Rolodex with a couple of great names that you introduced me to. And I mean, I just thought the world of you, and I still do. And you're doing great, great work for all of us small business owners. But one of the great things also at TechTown was seeing you, making your rounds and talking to everybody. And, you know, for those that don't know what Ned is known for at TechTown, it's literally miles and miles and miles of walking a day around the main floor of TechTown and literally checking in with folks and sitting down and having a little chat, having a little coffee. And I think that that personal touch, back to what you were talking about earlier, has so much to do with you and your mindset and the personality that you have and that understanding and respect for the physical environment. So moving into, you know, where we find ourselves now, the last month or two, just out of sentimentality purposes, what is it that you miss the most about TechTown these days?
First of all, thank you. I appreciate that. I know that some people are like, why does that guy keep coming over here and bothering me? He needs to go away. But because it is selfish a little bit. Like, yeah, I recognize it. People tell me, oh, we like that you do that. But also, I need it. It's important for me. You know, I spend the rest of my day is on emails and phone calls, and I'm fundraising, and I'm, you know, strategizing my new programs, and, you know, putting out some fire that happened, whatnot, or fixing the leaks in a 100-year-old building or whatever it is.
Right.
So that personal time for me, I'm an extrovert. That is gold. And that's what I miss the most. I mean, my colleagues here, is my dog here? No, he's not here right now. He's, he's very nice. He's
Does he
not that
talk
bright.
back to you? Does he talk back to you?
He doesn't
He
give me any of the guff that y'all do.
Yeah.
He's also not doing any of the cool things that you guys are doing. He basically, goes outside, rolls around in bunny poop, comes in the house, and
Dad
sheds
saved
bunny poop.
me. Yeah,
that's it.
Saved me.
Yeah, that's about it. So I really do miss the energy. I really miss the creative people that are doing amazing things, whether it's a really cool technology product or it's a nonprofit that is helping school kids to various media outlets that are covering some of the most important issues of our day. We're trying new models. I mean, that's fun for me. That's what keeps me energized. Is much like in a city, there's always something new and different happening.
Totally.
And my favorite thing is when I walk through TechTown and I see a table of 3 different people from different groups that all happen to work there that are collaborating on something because they happen to have a serendipitous collision in the space, and now they're putting on a conference or helping a client out together or something like that. So
yeah. And then, because you guys are a co-working space amongst so many other things that you are, what now? What is the next, I think, and in my mind, and you're, I don't even know if you'd be considered an expert on this, because I don't think anybody's an expert. Everyone is learning as we go, but there's that 1 month period, what does a month from now look like? There's a 6-month period.
Yeah.
This is me sort of the strategy mind. I'm sure you have a much larger strategy mind than I do. What does the 1 year period look like? And what does the 5-year period look like? I mean, what do you do? How do you plan
fortunately, I have a chief operating officer named Kelly Kozlowski, who's an absolute wizard with this stuff. She has a great strategy mind.
Great.
And so much like on the front end of this, I walked out of a cabinet meeting at Wayne State in February 26th or 5th, I think. And we were having a conversation because our spring break was coming up and we had school-sponsored trips. We had a conversation about what should we do about that. Should we cancel them? Should we not? Blah, 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 blah. And I walked out of that meeting, walked back over to TechTown, walked into to see Kelly and said, we need a plan. We need a plan to shut all of this down because this is coming. And within about a week, less than a week, really, we had a 4-phase plan to handle all the different aspects of our business. So our tenants, our members, our clients that we serve, our staff, all these different aspects that we had to cover, and a communications plan around it. And it allowed us to be ahead of the game. So, the first week in March, we were sending non-essential people home. We were shutting the place to visitors. By March 11th, we were shutting everybody out, March 13th, so we were ahead of the game, and we'd already figured out how to use Zoom. By the time some of the other folks on March 16th were like, okay, we're not going to work, right? Which even just a matter of days. I mean, now 3 days is like 6 months worth of stuff happening. Literally, So we were a couple years ahead of people by being a few days ahead. And on the way, you're asking about the other side of this now. We're putting the same kind of plan together. It'll be phased. And I don't think the co-working comes back right away. We're doing a lot of survey work, just like we teach our businesses, customer discovery. We're doing that right now. You should have gotten a survey from us asking what, how you would feel comfortable, what things you need to see. So we're putting a plan in place. I don't think it'll be co-working. I think people will be able to get back into their offices next month, and then we'll sort of see where the data and the science takes us to how, and the comfort level of people coming back in. Now that's the short term. That's the 3 to 6 month period. You were asking longer term. I am incredibly optimistic because I get to watch every day technology and science solving problems. I am incredibly optimistic that we're going to come up with really good treatments for COVID, for vaccines. We're going to understand much more about how it spreads, who it spreads, what antibodies mean, and what kind of protection they give, things like that. So I would say, I really think that starting by, 6 to 8, 9 months from now, the science and technology will be way ahead of where we are now. And it will be able to make much more informed decisions about risk and not risk. So I'm confident that by this time next year, we'll be looking back on this like, man, do you remember when we first figured this thing out? That was crazy.
Yeah.
Remember when you couldn't buy toilet paper? Yeah, you know.
Do you have toilet paper, by the way?
I'm running out. I mean, like I said, we were early. So I don't know about you, but Google just sent out their tracking summaries they do every month. So it made me go and look. The month of April, I went nowhere. One red dot on my house. That's it. March, the first half of the month, it was like, there was one on March 13th where I went to Carvel to buy an ice cream cake, a cookie puss.
Of course.
Because that was worth going out for. Curbside, but like, and that was before the shutdown and all that. But after that, nothing. So why am I talking about this? You asked me.
Toilet paper. If you have toilet paper.
Right. There was one, the 16th through the 19th, there were 3 days when I went out in a row. Trader Joe's, Costco, and somewhere else. We loaded up before everybody caught on to this, you know.
It must have also been before the lines forming outside of the Trader Joe's.
Yeah, absolutely.
I won't do it. I can't.
Yeah, so we're still riding the high of having, you know, a couple months supply of toilet paper in the house. Yeah. But I did try on my last Instacart order from Kroger or wherever it was. I tried to get another thing of toilet paper. No joy.
No way.
I've got a couple more weeks here before I get desperate.
Well, I think I can help you out because my local gas station has some toilet paper. So if you ever need any, let me know.
$2 a roll, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. All of a sudden, I bought 3 packages, and it was like $17. I'm like, okay, that was.
Yeah, cool. Your butt will thank you later.
Yeah. Oh my God. So back to our favorite topic of Detroit. You and I and many other businesses, small and large and mid-size, lived through the bankruptcy. And the Detroit, bankruptcy, which of course was a global talking point. How do you think that we could apply any of the things that we learned then to what's going on now? And there's many questions around this, but in particular for the small business space, because Detroit is so well known for the restaurants and the new retail that's coming up. How do you apply? And are there lessons to be learned from bankruptcy for what is now happening in COVID?
Yeah, there absolutely are. I mean, some of them are lessons that are where you can see direct parallels. Mm-hmm. So we're going to lose some businesses. Mm-hmm. Let's just be honest. So that's something we're diligently working on to try and make sure that for the businesses that are not going to make it, mm-hmm. They're responsibly winding down so as not to further damage personal credit and things like that. Mm-hmm. That's the negative one. I always start with the negative. The positive thing is that Detroit really does hustle harder, mm-hmm. right? Like the folks that are in Detroit, I mentioned earlier, Detroit's not an easy place to be. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's not an easy place to live. If mm-hmm. the people in Detroit were looking for easy, they would have moved already to Chicago or, Philadelphia. I don't know, pick some other city where basic stuff generally kind of works, right? Yeah. The folks that are in Detroit are hardy souls. Like mm-hmm, mm-hmm. people, the song, if you can make it in New York, you can make it
I say
anywhere.
The same thing. Literally say the same thing. Yeah.
New York's easy. You see a little bit of money and
Say the same thing.
Yeah, Detroit, now that's a joint, right? So agreed. I'm not worried in the least about Detroiters as a whole. Yeah. I'm worried about individuals because, I think my favorite analogy of this whole situation is that we're not in the same boat. We're in the same storm, but we're in different boats. Mm-hmm. Some people have big old cabin cruisers and some people have dinghies with a leak in it, right?
That's excellent. Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'm worried about. For some of us, we live in our nice houses. We don't go out much. We still have jobs. Mm-hmm. Yes, we have lost friends and relatives, but my immediate family, my pod is healthy. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Basically I watch Netflix and I work, mm-hmm. right? These are the things I do. There are a lot of other people that are worried about finances, that are worried about their health, other things like that. That's who I'm worried about. Mm-hmm. So I think the parallels back to 2009 and 10 and that period afterwards is that we are going to survive. We will come out of this stronger than we went into it. It's not going to be easy, but we thrive on it not being easy. We're used to that here.
Mm-hmm. TechTown put together 2 funds, which were incredibly helpful. And we also know from firsthand experience that they really did a lot of good. How do you, it's so tricky because again, most of the, and this is coming from me, as a media platform owner and as somebody that's constantly on the line talking and learning and interviewing and writing about, and the whole team staying busy with stories of people that are in the city and businesses that are within the city. Most of the businesses that are, I think, in Detroit, and you'll know this way better than I will, but most of them are brick and mortar. Most of them are small businesses that are physical locations that you walk in through a store. And that doesn't have to mean that it's a retail. It could be an agency, but they actually have physical
Right.
spaces to them, right? You allocated, I don't know how many grants, I think around 700 maybe
700,
within,
yeah.
within the last round. How do you, what's a base criteria? And the reason I also ask is we actually interviewed some of the grantee winners of yours, or grant winners of yours, recently through a Detroitisit article. And some have a plan to move on and innovate and be as successful as ever, but some have, they're using the money to pay their bills and they're shutting down. So I mean, it's such a challenging decision
Right.
to make, but how do you say, okay, I will fund for X amount of money this type of a business because there's a future that we see within them, and this is you guesstimating that there might be, or because we went through the process and it's a digital process. So you actually, besides our finances, you actually don't have you don't know what our desired for the future is going to be besides the couple of questions you asked us.
No.
Or do you just say, come what may, these people need to maybe make their last paychecks to their, final employees. And if they shut down, they shut down. How do you make that decision? And how do you know who to
So
fund?
that's a really a great question. So when we were doing the first one of these funds, which was that first weekend, March 13th to the
I
16th,
remember.
when we
Way ahead.
we sort of sat down, we started making phone calls to partners at DGC and Invest Detroit and MEDC and NEI, those people who were working day in and day out with these small businesses.
Yeah.
And we said, hey, this can be a problem, we think the governor hadn't even shut everything down yet, but it was clear it was coming. We were watching universities had shut down, and the students all went to the bars. And I'm like, oh boy, clearly they're going to have to shut everything down, right? And when they do that, these businesses are going to go broke. Mm-hmm. So we called around and said, what are you guys going to do? What are you going to do? And they got told, I don't know. We don't have the ability to respond quickly to this. So, but they said, clearly there's a need. We agree with you. We'll help whatever you guys decide to do. Mm-hmm. So we talked about this. We knew we needed cash. It couldn't be a loan. It couldn't be, a tax credit or anything like that. People needed to pay their rent. They needed to pay their employees. They needed to pay off suppliers and things like that. So we had to be a grant. We talked through how prescriptive should we be. And, initially we talked about making grants of up to $10,000 with some more prescription. And then we talked about just giving everybody who applied $500. Yeah. And we tried to balance an amount that would be helpful without getting prescriptive, and to have a little more faith that the business owner knows what they need more than a set of general rules would be. But we knew that in doing so, some of that money was going to get wasted. And some of that money would end up going to businesses that didn't survive. But the reality is no amount of money can prop up a business if the numbers don't work, if there isn't demand for it. And even if in a couple weeks we all get told, okay, you can go to the restaurants again, you can go to whatever, we're not. Like, we just know that the demand is going to be down, the business revenues is going to be down for a while, and a lot of these businesses were already on really thin margins and were scraping by. So we made that conscious decision that we were going to give away $600,000 in the first round, and another $600,000 in the second, which came later, and that some of it wasn't going to keep a business alive forever, but that most of it would. And that still continues to be consistent with our follow-up, that the majority of these businesses are going to continue to go and are making it a go, and have gone out and gotten a PPP, have gotten money from DGC or MEDC to continue on. And that was always a thought. We'll get you $5,000 real quick until the cavalry arrives. Yeah. But to your question about brick and mortar versus non-brick and mortar, we had that debate too. And we decided to start with brick and mortar because we knew that there were economic multiplier effects from that, because You've got a landlord that you've got to pay. You're much
Yeah.
more likely to have suppliers. You have more overhead, right? If you're working from home and you're cutting nails and cutting hair and doing nails, or
Sure.
acting as a caterer or whatever, yes, your revenue might be down, but you probably don't also have a staff that comes to your office every day, and you don't pay rents and the same utilities and things like that. And you can go on unemployment. We talked with the folks at Leo at the state who told us they were going to expand that to 1099 and sole proprietors as well. So that was our goal. But when we finished that up and the DGC came in and started doing theirs, we realized they were going to do brick and mortar as well. And then now we needed to go back. And so our second fund was open to not only Hamtramck and Island Park, as well as Detroit, but also to home-based businesses, makers, people like that who were really struggling because their revenue had dried up as well.
Which is a great sort of caveat into innovation, because there's so many different factors and so many different ways of looking at innovation. And to me, I think that every human being on the planet is innovative. Whether they tap into it more or less than others is a different story. Just like creativity, I view that every human is creative. It's just how much you tap into it. But with innovation, and this is a little bit of a, kind of a personal diatribe on my end, because I'm a huge proponent of innovation. I believe that what we do is pretty innovative with a lot of the back end things that we're doing, that we're moving into. And this idea of digital, and this idea of not being potentially reliant on only brick and mortar, not that there won't be brick and mortar obviously, but only brick and mortar. And what does innovation look like? And again, innovation can be taking a restaurant and switching it over to feeding, frontline workers. But for example, on the restaurant or small business or retail side, I consider restaurants retail. How long can you thrive in a business that if you are waiting for customers to come in through your door and your goal is to have full capacity of whatever it is, 200, heads an hour, whatever, the seating capacity is for a restaurant, and all of a sudden you're delivering through great fundraising, which is good stuff, or Grubhub or Uber Eats, individual, carry out. How long can you survive within a scenario like this?
Yeah, that's a great question, and the answer is it varies. Some places have bigger staffs and they can just reduce some of that and continue to serve a lesser number of clientele. But sometimes the mortgage number doesn't work, or the rent or the existing debt they have from the build out doesn't work. So it's very case by case. And this is I mentioned way at the top when you're asking about what we do, and I was saying how we're very tactical. The next phase of our efforts is something called 313 Strong that NEI has helped collaborate with. And this is one of the most robust technical assistance programs ever created. And it's to take these folks that have gotten money from the DGC or from TechTown or whatnot and saying, all right, now we're going to give you 12 to 16 hours of one-on-one, hands-on, individualized training, and a digital platform to get you, the videos and templates for how to do your books and all that kind of stuff, and how to digitally market and how to change blah 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 blah. And we're going to spend the next 6 months, giving these folks, a couple hours a week of like, let's really drill down to see if these numbers make sense and see what we can do, what other revenue streams can we tap into. And you're seeing a lot of this innovation where, restaurants are now also selling bread or flour or eggs or toilet paper at your local wherever. You're seeing people pivot to different, selling online or different stream, different sales streams. Some people are doing completely different business models. So Honey is Space for Moms, which is a really cool co-working / mental health physical location in Ferndale, one that we're partnering with the TechTown to bring childcare and things into the city for our members, is now doing an online business, which means they can do it everywhere. Anyone around the country can sign on for their workshops and seminars. So that's not going to solve everyone's problem, and some people aren't going to be able to adapt and change either quickly enough or to a big enough scale. But that's where we're going to have to end up. So we're really pushing people towards, I mentioned customer discovery before. When you start a business, you have to do a ton of customer discovery. And you did this when you started yours. You went around and met with people. Does this seem like a good idea? Would you pay for this? Would you want to deliver once a week, once a day, 3 times a day? Those kinds of questions. Small business owners have to do that again. They have to go back out to their existing customers and say, do you still want my chicken wings? Do you still want my cupcakes? If I delivered them, would you buy them? Would you get a subscription model? Would you, all that kind of stuff. And you're seeing wine clubs popping up and, different ways to try and generate revenue, which I won't say it's good that this happened, but certainly is unlocking some, necessity is the mother of invention. There's a lot of necessity out there right now.
Totally. And I remember a long time ago, I was told a pretty interesting quote where a friend mentioned, you're only given as much as you can handle. And truly, I think if you dig into yourself, and if you really, like to your point, start thinking through how innovative can I be with the business that I have at hand, this is the time. I mean, this is it.
Yeah.
Your 5 tips, because coming from you, we'd love to ask you 10, but I'm not gonna do that to you.
We're lucky to get 2 or 3, man.
Okay, no, give me what you can. But top tips for small businesses or startups in Detroit going through what's happening now, right now. I'm talking within the next month, that you would see would be the top tips that a business should consider doing for their future success.
So the first one I'm going to say is going to sound a little counterintuitive, but I believe it. And that is, think holistically. Care about your people, care about your community, care about your neighbors. I've been somewhat infamous for telling small businesses, because especially now, and I think in some ways it's great, that they should stop with all the, I want to do good for my community, blah, blah, blah. And just make some money, man. You want to do good for your community, make some money, hire some people from your community with all the money you're making.
Totally agree.
So I'm going to flip that around a little bit and say, this is a time for you to live up to those values that you put on your website, right? About your community and caring and integrity, inclusion, all those things. Because there is an economic return for that. There's going to be a decrease in demand, a shrinking of demand. People are going to choose to shop more with places that resonate with them. And if you've been good to your employees, they're going to stick with you and bear with you. If you've been good to your clients, they're going to come back and patronize your location and whatnot. So that's the first one. It's a little counterintuitive, but a little short-term, maybe financial pain goes a long way in producing results for you. That's I think the first one. Other things that businesses really need to be doing right now is cash flow, and this is going to be counter to the last one I just said. Really keep track of your cash flow. So make some investments without spending any money. Yeah, sure. It's sort of like we tell entrepreneurs, don't take no for an answer. If someone says no, go right through that wall. And you're right. Stick to your guns. Also,
you don't hear it. Yeah.
Be flexible and be coachable and know when to pivot, right? So similarly, you're going to need to really be tight with your cash, except in the cases where you're taking care of your people and making long-term investments. So, but you do really need to watch your cash flow right now, because we don't know whether this, in 2 to 3 weeks, people are going to be like, great, let's get back up and open, and cases won't spike back up, and we won't end up shut down. Or, you see a Georgia or Texas, it's already opened up now. If cases spike up again, we're going to be locked down for another month or 2. So keep the pennies that you have in the bank and be smart. I would encourage people to continue to look for other revenue streams. So some of it is through their business. Some of it is through the lending community, the PPP loan from the feds. Like, if you haven't applied for one of those yet, they still have some money left. You need to go out today. Whenever this airs, next thing you do after you
ASAP
click, end the podcast, is go and apply for a PPP loan. It's a forgivable loan. The terms are really good. Even if you don't get the loan forgiven, it's 1% interest with no payments for a long time. That's cash
6 months
you can hold on to for kind of free. So I highly recommend you do that. I also think there will be more support coming. I know that the House Democrats are about to propose another form of it, so keep your eye out for that.
Totally.
I don't know if that was 5 or 3 or 8, but there was
many, all good. I was taking notes on the back end. No, all good stuff. I mean, and I think it's about being realistic and
Mhm.
seeing best practices that other folks are doing potentially. I mean, who knows what's best. But I think, a lot of my end, you've been in the business world for how many years now as well. It's also following gut instinct. But like your core gut instinct, that sort of idea that what you know is right, and of course having the flexibility, but at the core you really do know what's right for you or for your family or for your community at the core, and those are values and morals and ethics that you, like you mentioned, sticking with your team and sticking with saving money at this time. Don't be rash, I think, as well, from a business perspective. And I'm seeing so many of our friends within the city that are doing amazing things right now, that are completely transforming the way that they're looking at their customers and what they're delivering, but they have a really strong customer base as well. So, time to explore slightly, but ultimately stick to the core of what you believe to be right for your business.
Right, right.
There's a little bit of my end. So, ending thoughts, books that you're reading now that you absolutely need to share with us, even if it's one. I need to add to my book list.
Oh, books. I'm gonna have to tell you that the books that I'm listening to now are garbage for the most part. Um, but
I'll tell you one that I'm reading right now. It's The Existentialist Cafe, which is pretty cool. It takes you into other places of time. That there's some relativity to what's going on, because there's also during wartime and similar. So there's some cool
gotcha.
relevance there. Or in movie, what are you binging? What are you
So
watching?
I will say book wise, I'm not reading this right now. I read it a couple years ago, and
Yeah.
my boss and I were talking on earlier this week at our one-on-one, and he mentioned he was reading it.
Mm-hmm.
So and I'll go, oh, that was such a great book. Genghis Khan and the Making of the Modern World.
Wow.
Highly recommend it. It's a
Wow.
fabulous book about
Okay.
a lot of things. I mean, clearly it's about the Mongol Empire, et cetera, but it also teaches you how history gets written by the winners. And
Mm-hmm.
they did a lot of cool stuff like public education, and they invented banking and
Amazing.
paper-based money, and things like that. And we're actually a very religiously tolerant group that showed up in Europe in the 13th century, and basically got there, and
Mm-hmm.
we're like, who are you unwashed
Mm-hmm.
savages? We're not okay. We're leaving. We're gonna go to the Middle East where there's cool stuff happening.
Yeah.
So and the Europeans were like, yes, we
Yeah.
defeated the Horde. Like, no, they defeated you, and they left
You. Yeah.
because they were bored of you. Anyway, so I highly recommend
I
that. But
love
in
it.
terms of binges, tough to beat Money Heist. It's a
Isn't it
little bit
awesome?
cheesy, but it's definitely gripping. I've been enjoying it.
Yeah, I think we've all got our favorites. Those are super. Your one liner and the hope for the future. Now that we talked a little bit about the past, but hope for the future.
Hope for the future. This too will rise from the ashes. I mean,
Yeah.
Detroit is
Amen.
amazingly resilient place. Um, love the city, love the people in it.
Yeah.
We're gonna get through this. We've
Yeah.
gotten through everything that the world has thrown against us for decades and decades and decades. This too shall pass. We're gonna get
Yeah.
through it. We'll end up being stronger and more unified than ever. And I look forward to coming back into TechTown and giving everybody big old hugs. Virtual maybe at first, but slowly over months, coming back in and hugging everybody.
Yeah, we can't wait either. Ned, you're awesome. This was just super duper good stuff. Thank you so much for
Thanks,
sharing
Ivana.
with
Good luck with
us.
stuff, and I'll talk to you soon.
You got it. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.